Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is What If Naruto Was Engaged to Ino Sasuke Bashing Part 2. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Ino awoke the next morning feeling great. She didn't know why but she just had the feeling that she was being protected and whatever was wrapped around her was very warm and fuzzy. Upon realizing that thought she blinked her eyes and began to move around. She looked down and realized first off she was only in an oversized t-shirt and a pair of boxers that weren't hers. Looking around, she found the reason for her contentment and gave a happy sigh. Laying beside her was a fox in human form. His 9 tails wrapped around her keeping out the chill and his ears twitching in his sleep. Unknowingly she began to stroke one of the tails and was delighted to see it thump against her leg. She was startled when she heard a pleasant moan come from the body beside her, but that brashness of hers made her keep going. After all, messing with Naruto was too much fun. Not wanting him to have any accidents, she stopped her ministrations and unwound herself from her fuzzy prison reluctantly. Stretching she began to take in the sights. Naruto's bedroom was a sight to behold. Weapons decorated the walls and suits of samurai armor stood along the wall across from the bed. A fireplace stood on the opposite end with 2 leather armchairs in front of it. The room was huge, almost the size of her whole apartment. She loved it and hoped to see more of it in the future. During her tour of the house last night, she had noticed that while the house as a whole was charming and cozy, it needed a woman's touch. Naruto and Hikaru were the epitome of bachelors, only having the bare necessity of items and pleasantries. This would have to change. Out of the corner of her eye she noticed a desk with a notebook opened on top. Curiosity getting the better of her she sauntered over and flopped into the chair and began to read. After several minutes she put the notebook back where it should have been and readjusted the pages. Putting her hands to her cheeks she realized that they were on fire from blushing. Naruto was writing an Ika book where she was the star. Hell, he'd barely even changed the name. She was somewhere between turned on and pissed when she felt a pressure on her back and something soft and furry stroke her cheeks. Leaning back she saw a wide-awake Naruto with a huge smile on his face. So you've been reading my work without permission? Tisk, tisk Ino. I thought you knew better. But seeing as how you've read it now, what do you think? Am I worthy of being the writer of Ika or what? Ino looked back down at the notebook and began to think. He was a great writer, that was for damn sure. And being immortalized in a book sounded really great. But, on the other hand, she was going to be in his dirty little book, and everyone knew about their relationship. She couldn't be seen in that light. Her parents would kill her first and him second, after they got through trying some of the things he wrote. She was brought out of her musings by a tickling, warm feeling and looked down to see he had his tails woven around her. She giggled and stroked them before looking back up at his face. I like it. But you ever write about the things we did last night and I swear I'll have a new fur wrap for my shoulders. Got it. The sugary, sweet way it was said did nothing to help the dark undertones of what she was saying. With a gulp, Naruto just nodded his head yes. Seeing her smile in victory, she was getting way too many wins for his taste. He decided to have the life-changing conversation he'd put off since last night. He would have done it yesterday but a certain blonde had latched herself onto him and, well, luckily Hikaru wasn't around to see the collateral damage. Ino smiled in spite of herself. Who knew that tails were so useful or that fox ears were apparently so sensitive? She'd had him at her beck and call and all she'd done was scratch his ears. Her thoughts were broken when she heard Naruto sigh. Come into the living room Ino. I'll make some tea and we can discuss why I look like I do and where we go from here. She nodded dumbly and made her way to her favorite couch. Picking up a blanket and spreading it over her legs she propped herself up on some pillows and waited. Soon enough Naruto reappeared carrying a tray of tea and some cookies and set them on the small table in front of her. He poured her a cup and handed it off, settling into the cushion beside her. She took a sip of tea and sighed, Naruto was an excellent cook and he always made the best tea. Cutting her eyes sideways, she saw him sitting there with a far-off look. Before she could ask what's wrong, he cleared his throat. Ino, did you mean it last night, when you said you loved me? Yes, I do. It's taken me a while to realize it, but I believe I do. Do you accept me as I am? Would you hate me if I am something I don't appear to be? I'm not everything you see on the surface, Ino. There's more. And I don't know how you'll take it. But for us to have anything after today, I'm going to tell you everything. Then tell me everything. I'm pretty sure that there's nothing you can tell me that would make me hate you, Naruto. Besides, you look pretty cute as a fox boy and I wouldn't change that for the world. Yeah, that's funny. We'll see if your tune changes or not. God, I hope not. Truth be told, Ino, I'm starting to fall in love with you. I can't help it. There's something about you that makes me feel safe and wanted, like you'll accept me for me. All I ask is that you don't ask me any question while I talk. This is difficult for me and I want to be able to tell it my way. Now I know that you know of the Kyuubi and how it was sealed into me. You know of my childhood and how I grew up. You know of how we defeated the Akatsuki. You know that I am the Toad Sennin. You know that I am Uzumaki Naruto, the son of the Yondaime Hokage. You know of my failed marriage to Sakura and my shattered dream of being Hokage. What you don't know is that there are reasons for it all. Some I know, some I don't. I know why the Kyuubi was sealed into me, but I don't know his reason for attacking the village. Every time I spoke to him he was a complete asshole. I hated him, but he kept me alive all these years so I can't really complain. I know we defeated the Akatsuki but I don't know why they wanted all the Biju except to rule the world. I am the Toad Sennin but I don't feel I deserve the title and I won't be able to keep it long anyway. I am the son of the Yondaime, but I have never been a son to anyone. I am a father, and yet at times I feel I have failed my son because of what his mother did. I don't know why she left, but I know it was not because of my appearance now. She doesn't know about this, no one knows but you and Hikaru. Tsunade doesn't even know. I didn't change until after Sakura left. It's complicated, but you deserve to know. The day after she left, I was trying to comfort Hikaru when a small pillar of flame burst next to me. I didn't know what was going on so I leapt to my feet and put my back to the wall. Out of the flame stepped a small black fox with an ethereal glow about him. He looked around the room and then looked at me. He raised his head and then bowed low. He called me Lord Kyuubi. I didn't know what to think and demanded to know what he meant. He informed me that the old Kyuubi was soon to be dead, totally integrated into my system, and that made me the holder of the title Kyuubi. I was dumbfounded to say the least. He kept on with his explanation that since I used most of my power to keep the old Kyuubi at bay that I had the power base of 2 nine-tailed Biju. I was, in essence, a god among men. Imagine Ino, losing your wife one day and then finding that you are now considered the commander of a Vulpine army, a legion totally loyal to you. But there was one problem, he said. I was still human. To attain my power I would have to completely absorb the old Kyuubi and take my rightful place as a demon king. I couldn't believe what he was asking me to do. Become a demon. That's what I had strove to prove I wasn't my whole life. But the more I thought about it, the more I didn't care. Why risk my life for people who didn't care for me, when I could accept this power and keep my son safe? I could accept this power and rule a new people, as a king, not just a Hokage. At the time I still didn't know that being Hokage was inaccessible to me, but I thought I could have the best of both worlds. Childish, yes, but who in history could claim to be a demon in the cage of Konohagakure? I agreed to this fusion of sorts and the fox began to chant. I became lost in his words and felt my mind collapse in on itself. Everything became a blur and I found myself in front of the cage of the Kyuubi one last time. It thrashed and cursed me, but I paid it no mind. The closer I got to the gate the more frantic it became until it was foaming at the mouth. I simply took hold of the small paper that said, "Seal," and whispered, "Kai." Ripping the paper off, the gates flew open and I was pushed back into a wall across the room. I watched in horror as the voice of that black fox bounced off every wall and the Kyuubi howled in anger. The last thing I remember it saying before all of its essence was sucked into me was that it was betrayed by its own people. While saddened by any betrayal, I couldn't feel too sorry for it since it ruined my life and showed no remorse because of it. Once I snapped out of my own mindscape, I saw Hikaru standing across the room, looking at me with curiosity and fear. I stepped forward and called out to him, and when he heard my voice he launched himself into my arms and began to cry. I soothed him as much as I could, until I felt a foreign furriness wrap around us both. Looking around, I saw that I had 9 red tails whipping around me. Snatching my son off the ground, I ran into the bathroom and frantically looked in the mirror. My human ears were gone and my fangs were longer. Red ears sat atop my head and the tails whipped about, mirroring my confusion and horror. Suddenly I felt a weight on one and looked down to see it tickling Hikaru and making him laugh while he played with it. Oh, the mind of a child, to be able to see the good in such a thing. It warmed my heart, and in the back of my mind, I felt happy, since my son loved how I looked now. It made me cuddly, he said, and I couldn't deny him his logic. Walking back into the living room, I saw the black fox sitting on its haunches, waiting for my inevitable questions. I carried my son with me and sat in my chair with him on my lap. I asked why I was bestowed with such an honor when I was a human. Why was I the new Kyuubi? The answer was that I was noble and pure, I had suffered and I had endured, and that only one who could defeat the old Kyuubi was worthy of being the leader of the Vulpine. I took that in and suddenly I was bombarded with memories that were not mine. Visions of a golden throne and foxes running everywhere swept across my mind. The foxes were afraid of me and I was a terrible, powerful being. Asking what the visions meant, I was given the explanation that by absorbing the old Kyuubi I must have taken more than power. I took his knowledge. Fearing for my son's life if I inherited his bloodlust as well, the black fox sighed, guessing what I was thinking by the look in my eyes, and told me that only memories and power were absorbed, not traits and characteristics. I asked why I appeared as I did and was told that he didn't know. Perhaps it was because I was the first human turned demon, or because I subconsciously wanted to retain a part of my humanity. I took all this in and filed it away. I felt Hikaru playing with my tails again and smiled. I asked what would become of my son and was told that he was human. He would never be demon. I sighed in relief and asked if he carried over any of the old Kyuubi's traits since he had whiskers. The black fox smiled and told me that I had awakened a new bloodline, one of power and fortitude. My descendants would be powerful at young ages and they would be nearly invincible in battle due to a heightened regenerative state. I smiled even wider knowing that out of all my turmoil, my son had a great gift, and this was enough to ease my troubled heart slightly. Having all my troublesome questions about my son's well-being answered, I turned to my new advisor and asked what the Vulpine would need of me. My answer was that I would need to find a mate. One who was strong and beautiful and could help me in my days as ruler. I was to come to the realm of demons and rule wisely and with kindness. The old Kyuubi was a tyrant and they felt no loss in losing him. All they required was that I use my gifts as Uzumaki Naruto to make the Vulpine the greatest of all demon clans. I agreed wholeheartedly until I remembered the remark about a mate and I became crestfallen. Nobody would love a demon and I knew this from the bottom of my heart. I asked what would happen if I didn't find a mate and was told that I would be removed from power and killed. I needed a mate so that a lineage could be established. Hikaru was a human and no matter how powerful he was not immortal as I was now. This amazed me. I'm immortal. How then was I supposed to find a mate that would live as long as I? The black fox smiled and said that my mate would receive my mark and a measure of my power and immortality. She would be more powerful than the strongest cage and her kits would be great and wonderful. But how was I to find such a woman when the one I loved with all my heart had just walked out on me? I was 20 when Sakura left me. The Black Fox said I had 5 years to find a mate or I would be removed from power. I nodded my head in understanding and then realized I hadn't asked his name. He smiled and told me his name was Genmaki. Hello to the both of you, Lord Naruto, Lady Ino. We have returned from our trip. Hikaru bounded across the floor and leapt into Naruto's arms and gave him a hug. Naruto returned it with some of his tails, which sent Hikaru into a giggle fit. Ino smiled at the heartwarming scene until she remembered their conversation and went wide-eyed at the implications. In a small voice she called out to Naruto, halting his and Hikaru's tickle fight. Naruto, are you saying that you need a mate or you'll die? Yes, that's what I'm saying. I have a little over 1 year left before the Vulpine Council of Elders comes to view my mate. Genmaki here believes that you would be a most wonderful vixen and so do I. Oh, a vixen am I? I thought I was your girlfriend and here I am just another vixen. Now Ino, don't be childish. This is serious. You've just found out my biggest secret. I'm a demon with a human child. I'm a ruler of a vast legion of foxes from another realm. I am Kyuubi now. Aren't you frightened? Why would I be frightened of my love? You've never been a demon to me, in mind or deed. Just because you physically are one doesn't mean you are in your heart. You'll always be Naruto to me. I love you for you. You treat me better than any man ever could and you're a wonderful father. And after hearing your story, I've made up my mind. Fearfully Naruto asked what decision she had made. I'm yours now and forever. Consider me your new queen, O mighty king of Bijus. Now the only question is where to put that mark. Oh, I know. Naruto, in his bliss, leaned in wondering where she wanted his mark to be put. Genmaki detected the teasing lilt in her voice however and readied himself for Naruto's downfall. You can just put it on my, since you seem to like kissing it so much. Naruto just sat there with a stunned look on his face while Genmaki and Hikaru died laughing at the stupid look on his face. Ino covered her mouth so she wouldn't giggle but the dumbfounded look on his face was too much and she laughed long and hard. Naruto broke out of his gaze and fixed them all with a glare, before a low growl caught in his throat making them all stop. His teeth swept back in a sneer and his fangs were bared, his ears thrown back in anger, and his tails whipped around in a frenzy. They all gulped thinking they had sent him over the edge when suddenly the sneer turned into a frighteningly familiar smirk. So you make fun of the mighty king of the foxes Not the brightest mortals around are you. And you, my faithful retainer, I thought you had more common sense. Prepare yourselves for my wrath. Ino stood there stupidly, but Hikaru and Genmaki yelped and tried to make it to the door. They knew what his wrath meant and tried to get away. Suddenly a tail encircled them both and brought them back into the center of the room. Ino found herself laying on her back beside Hikaru and Genmaki who were desperately trying to get loose. Naruto stood over them all and then leant forward and crawled over the top of Ino who began to breathe heavy under his intense glare. Now comes your punishment you three. You brought this on yourselves remember. Hikaru and Genmaki began to squeal and yelp and Ino turned her head to each side to see them being tickled mercilessly by the remaining 6 tails. She suddenly felt her head jerked back forward to be brought under the gaze of a severely smirking Naruto. And as for you my queen. Her eyes jerked wide when instead of being punished she felt herself being kissed deeply by her lover and new king. Sighing into the kiss, she threw her arms around her neck and never heard the noise levels beside her drop as Naruto lost concentration and began to kiss her with more desire. The only thing that brought them out of their revelry was an "eewww" from Hikaru and a throat-clearing sound from Genmaki. Grinning sheepishly, they both made their way to their feet and blushed a bright red. Neither Hikaru or Genmaki minded really, but there were other pressing matters than seeing who had the strongest tongue. Now then that the young ones have their hormones under control, we can continue. Lady Ino, are you certain that you love Lord Naruto with all your heart? Will you stand beside him through the years? Can you leave your humanity and mortality behind for a lifetime of servitude to your new king and mate? I am sure. I love him and I want to be happy. He can make me happy, and if giving up my humanity is what brings happiness, then so be it. But what will happen to me when I'm made his mate? Hikaru, leave the room and do not eavesdrop. I must speak with them alone. Now that the boy is gone, I must tell you some things. I do not know how this will affect you. You will be only the second human to become a demon, and I don't know what will happen to you physically. On a mental and spiritual level, you will be able to feel how your mate feels, and you will feel a deepening of love for him. You will be able to communicate with each other telepathically due to your bond, and this will be of great importance should either of you ever be in trouble. I don't know anything else. Will the mark hurt? Where will it be? Well, unfortunately, no matter how funny it might have been, it won't be on your. That would be awkward for both of you, seeing as Lord Naruto has to bite you for it to take form. The neck is the easiest place since you have to bite him as well once your transformation is complete to seal the deal. Now get hopping, you two. I'm sure Hikaru wants to play with his new mother. New mother? But we're not married yet. I can't be his mother. Oh please. You will be mated on a level more deep than a mere marriage by law. And you have been more of a mother in 6 months to that boy than that Sakura was his whole life. Now bite her, Lord Naruto. Naruto stepped forward and gripped Ino by the shoulders. She was afraid, but when Naruto uttered, "I love you," in her ear all her fears went away. Baring his fangs, he bit into her neck at the base where her shoulder met, and she shivered with delight. Instead of pain, she felt warmth, love, and desire. Naruto stepped back to watch his handiwork and was astounded to see what was happening. Ino stood bathed in a white light, and she curled up on the floor with a whimper. Naruto went to move to her but was stopped by Genmaki shaking his head. After a few more moments, the light faded and there on the floor lay Ino, transformed. Her human ears were gone and were replaced by purple ears on top of her head that wiggled back and forth, catching sound. Her one tail waved behind her, and when Naruto knelt to pick her up, it entwined with one of his. He smiled at this and lifted her lips up to see the enlarged fangs. To him, she was absolute beauty, magnified 1,000,000 times. Setting her on the couch, he put her head in his lap and stroked her ears, earning him a contented purr. Genmaki smiled at the scene and his heart was lifted. Here before him was his new king and queen, and he couldn't be happier. They would rule with fairness, and surely the Vulpine would prosper. He walked back over to the door and let Hikaru back in. The little boy was astounded to see that Ino had a tail and ears like his daddy, and nearly squealed with delight when he went to grab it and it slapped him playfully. Ino felt someone stroking her ears and tail and woke with a contented sigh. She looked up into Naruto's face and smiled. She felt great, powerful, and she could hear, see, and smell everything with a clarity never known to her. Sitting upright, she moved into the bedroom and stood in front of Naruto's full-length mirror. She admired her royal purple tail and ears and pulled at her lips to see her new fangs. She smiled and thought, "Damn, I look drop-dead gorgeous. He'll have a harder time saying no to me now." This thought made her giggle, and she walked back into the living room and plopped down between Naruto and Hikaru. "So, what do you think, Ino? Are you happy with your new look and power?" "Oh yes. But I feel we're forgetting something." "You are. You must bite him now. Complete the union. Obtain your rightful place as queen, my lady." Ino leaned over and jerked Naruto's head down by the hair. She whispered in his ear, "If it felt orgasmic to me as a human, imagine how it's going to feel to a demon." His eyes bugged at this, and before he could protest to a change of location, she launched herself at his neck and bit as hard as she could. The flood of emotions he felt was nothing compared to the overwhelming sense of desire and need for her at the moment. She released her hold on his hair, and they both watched in fascination as a fox head-shaped seal appeared on both their necks at the junction where they were bitten. Naruto shuddered at her touch and pulled back quickly lest he do something in front of Hikaru he might regret. They both turned and saw Hikaru, and Genmaki bowed low on the floor. "My king and my queen. As the first of the Vulpine to acknowledge you, let it be my pleasure to inform the council of your decision." They had high hopes for you, and I'm sure your choice of mate will meet more than their approval but the approval of all Vulpine. Lady Ino, you are the first to ever have royal purple fur, a color most befitting a queen. I shall return shortly. You three enjoy your newfound family. Ino smiled at this and turned to Hikaru, who raised his head and met her gaze. Well, are you going to just sit there or are you going to give your mother a hug, son? With tears in his eyes, Hikaru launched himself at Ino and wrapped his arms around her neck, sobbing happily. She held him close and wrapped her tail around him. Suddenly she felt a familiar pressure and saw that Naruto had joined in and wrapped his tails around them all, bringing them close officially as a family. Ino looked up and grabbed the back of his head, pulling him in for yet another kiss. She smiled into it and a tear escaped her eye. I have all of eternity to spend with my mate. May this feeling of love never end. Genmaki appeared shortly and informed them that the council was overjoyed and that seeing as how they had given him 5 years to find a mate, that letting the new family have a year to themselves was not such a bad thing. Everyone was happy and a feeling of bliss overran them all. Hikaru finally had a mother again and Naruto and Ino had someone to love. Alas, the feeling of security cannot last forever, and even though one group accepts you wholeheartedly doesn't mean everyone else will. Later that night, while lying in their bed, after an army of clones had moved all of Ino's belongings from her apartment to her new home, Ino sighed after another round of demonic lovemaking. While no different than any humans, the sheer stamina they possessed made it so that the unthinkable was possible. Once they had collapsed back onto the pillows and Ino made herself comfortable on her favorite pillow, Naruto's chest, she sighed contentedly and intertwined their tails once again. Suddenly a feeling of apprehension overtook her and she looked up fearfully at Naruto. Sensing her discomfort, he put his arm around her and drew her in closer, asking what was wrong. We've forgotten one critical thing now, Naruto. While I'm happy for us both, we have a difficult task ahead of us. Yeah, I know. We have a whole legion to rule and an empire to raise. Not to mention raising Hikaru and starting a family all to ourselves. If I'd known what being king meant. No, Naruto. That's all important too, but this has me afraid for real. What is it? We have to talk to our parents and tell them what happened. Then we have to tell everyone else since we'll be around less. Okay, we'll talk to your parents and everybody else, but mine are dead, remember? I don't have anyone to report to. Oh yes you do. Your mother and father will be very interested to see you've become a demon and are mated to me, another demon. And who are my mother and father, pray tell? Tsunade and Iruka. Not even a cricket chirp was heard for several moments as the bedroom was filled with a sickening silence. Suddenly it broke when Naruto's small voice bounced off every wall. Oh shit. Okay. I can do this, I can do this, I can't do this. Naruto, stop fidgeting. Your tails keep hitting me and it's getting annoying. Look, all we gotta do is tell my parents and Iruka-sensei and Tsunade-sama that we're demons now and rulers of a vast kingdom. It'll be easy. Naruto just stared at her like she'd grown another head. After much whining, he had finally fallen asleep last night only for reality to hit him like a sledgehammer to the nuts the next morning. He had found a mate and he couldn't be happier, but now he had to inform Tsunade that he wouldn't be around much after the coming year. He'd have to go to his new domain and make decisions and alliances, fight for his people, basically be responsible for everything. The mere thought hurt his head and he began to whine piteously again until Ino whacked him over the head with his notebook that she had been reading again. Seriously, who would have thought his mate would have been into naughty stories? The sound of the door flying open brought both of them out of their stupors and Ino quickly hid the offending notebook from Hikaru's eyes. The blonde and pink-haired boy bounded across the floor and spring-boarded onto the bed, landing in between his father and his new mother, snuggling their tails. The feeling of affection from the nuzzling of her tail brought out motherly instincts in Ino and she grabbed the boy and sat him on her lap, hugging him. Well, good morning, sunshine. How was your night? It was good, Miss Ino. I always sleep good when Genmaki is around. That's good. And what did I tell you about calling me Miss Ino? You can call me Mom, okay? Okay, Mom. There. That's better. Now then, Naruto, we're going and that's final. We're doing it today because Daddy doesn't have any missions and Mom's not working the flower shop. Uruka can find a substitute and I'm pretty sure Tsunade will cancel any appointments she has to hear this. We're going to see Grandma. Yay. I love visiting Grandma, she always gets me snacks and presents. And she beats up Daddy and they're always funny. Ino cocked an eyebrow and looked at Naruto, who rubbed the back of his head sheepishly. Hey, she says I have no respect for authority and she wants her grandson to grow up respectful. I don't know what she's talking about though. I'm respectful, right? Silence greeted him as all parties present. Genmaki had come in after Hikaru and sat at the end of the bed, just gave him incredulous looks. Right. Oh come on. I'm not that bad. And besides that, now I am authority. That doesn't mean you aren't disrespectful, sweetie. In fact, I'd say that you deserve more punishment than Tsunade-sama gives you. She's pretty lenient with you, you know. Yeah, well, you've never been hit by her either. Touché. But I don't think it hurts as bad as you say it does, you big baby. Tell you what, next time she hits you I'll kiss it better. How's that sound? Hikaru, of course, made an eewww noise at the notion of kissing that earned him a bonk on the top of his head from his mother. He pouted and crossed his arms, causing Ino to giggle and kiss the top of his head. Now Hikaru, don't be such a baby. It doesn't become you. Go get dressed, we're leaving soon. As soon as the boy was out the door, Genmaki stepped forward for any orders. Naruto finally noticed him and gave him a small smile. Genmaki, I think it's time to retrieve the scroll. We've been dormant as a race for too long. It's time we joined the world of summons. And there are 3 people who will sign right off the bat. Genmaki started to bow low but Naruto leapt off the bed and stopped him by grabbing his head and turning his face back up. Confusion swept over the fox's face until Naruto gave his reason. Genmaki, never bow to me again. I may be king but I have always been a humble person. You have been my most trusted friend and advisor these past 3 years. I consider you my equal and a dear friend. Never bow in front of me. Stand beside me as I rule. Genmaki looked at his ruler with awe. The old Kyuubi had instilled a sense of fear and respect for power during his rule. If you disobeyed or disrespected, you died. But now here he was being told that he was seen as an equal and important part of the court. Tears of joy sprang to his eyes and he laughed in happiness. Lord Naruto, you have no idea how happy I am that you are king. Truly we will prosper under you and Lady Ino. I will honor your wishes and I shall never bow before you but I shall always revere you, my friend. His reward was a genuine smile from Naruto and a rub between the ears. While the 2 males were enjoying their bonding experience, Ino sat on the bed and watched with pride. This is what made her mate so special. He could befriend anyone, make anyone feel special, make something from nothing. He had that one intangible that made him a good ruler and even greater friend, kindness. Seeing that the 2 weren't moving and she really wanted to get this over with, she coughed into her hand until they noticed her. With a nod of his head, Genmaki disappeared to retrieve the fox summoning scroll. Naruto stood and stretched, gaining an appreciative eye from Ino. Noticing her eyeing him up, he sauntered over to her side of the bed and leaned in like he was going to kiss her. She closed her eyes and waited until she felt his hand envelop her face, scrunching her cheeks into a pucker. Opening her eyes, she saw a plagueal grin and even more playful glint in his eyes. I think you had enough last night, princess. Now get dressed and we'll do this while my nerve is up. She stood and made towards the closet while Naruto straightened the covers back out. While fluffing the pillows he found himself wondering what he was forgetting. Suddenly, it came to him. Ino, didn't you hide my notebook under your pillow? A reply of, yeah, came from the deep recesses of the closet. Then why? Well, I can't find it and if you don't have it then. Hikaru. The procession of the Uzumakis down the streets of Konoha was a spectacle to behold. They turned heads everywhere even though they weren't trying to. It's just when you see three people in a fox, laughing and enjoying the day like a family, it's a little unsettling. Not to mention that they all looked regal. The two adults had an almost ethereal glow about them and warmth was emanating from them. The small boy, riding on the back of a Great Dane-sized fox, was laughing happily. But what stunned most, aside from their attitudes, was the clothing all were wearing. Naruto, much to the delight of women and chagrin of men, was decked out in clothes befitting a man of status. His black slacks were immaculate and fell over his polished leather boots. His shirt of orange silk, still hasn't given up on that ridiculous color, had black flames licking a line across his chest. His battle coat flowed majestically behind him and gave him an aura of power. The Hittite of the Toad Sennin adorned his brow and his smile exuded happiness and his eyes shone with power. His mate walking beside him was the object of much envy and hatred. The women were all still jealous of her for stealing Naruto from bachelorhood, giving them little to no chance to have him, since he seemed so happy with her. The streets were almost flooding with drool from the males of Konoha as she passed by, hanging on the arm of her king. Instead of her normal black shirt and skirt, she had opted to spice things up a little with color. Digging as far into her wardrobe as possible, she had come out with a blood-red skirt, a black shirt emblazoned with a gold-stitched fox, and her shoes were the heeled sandals with fishnet leggings. Her birthday present from Naruto was proudly on display, a royal purple battle coat, fitted to her size, with the kanji for Queen on the back. Her hair pulled back into the familiar ponytail with a diamond scrunchie. Nobody could accuse Naruto of being cheap when it came to his mate, and her Hittite around her waist. They made quite the pair. Hikaru was perhaps the most normally dressed out of the three, even though he too was dressed for success. Decked out in khaki slacks with black sandals and a black button-up shirt with the Konoha leaf symbol in silver thread on the back. He was a very sharply dressed little boy. Genmaki merely plodded along, seemingly oblivious to all the stares they were getting. On the inside he was swearing about having to lug around a heavy Hikaru and wishing they could have just teleported to the Hokage office. But no, Ino wanted to show off her new family and insisted on walking through town. Curse his loyalty to his master, oh thank the stars, they were finally there. Naruto breathed deep before opening the door to Tsunade's office. This was the final plunge, letting everyone dear to him in on his secret. Although now it was more than just his secret, Ino was at risk too. There she sat in all her glory, head on the table, drool coming from her mouth, and her starting to pop slightly out of her top. Ino immediately clapped her hand over Hikaru's eyes lest he see his grandmother's goodies. Naruto was torn between waking her up, an immediate death sentence in Konoha, and leaving and coming back later. Suddenly he heard a low chuckle from one of the high-back chairs in front of her desk. Slipping quietly up behind it, he peered over the back and saw Jiraiya, his former master, giggling perversely and making notes in his infamous notebook. A wry smile crossed Naruto's face. At least he wouldn't have to look all over for the hermit. 2 birds, 1 stone, and he even got to see the old man put through the wall. Good times. Crossing his arms on the back of the chair, he spoke in a voice loud enough to wake Tsunade. You know, Ero Sennin, I thought I was the author of the books now. Your research really is nothing more than pervertedness. Tsunade immediately shot up and glared at the toad hermit, who began to whimper in fear at his punishment. An arm shot out, a cry rang out, and Jiraiya was embedded in the wall across the room while Tsunade tried to calm herself down. Now standing, her shirt had loosened even more and her ta-tush were spilling out. Ino had to speak up since Naruto's tongue was sufficiently tied, not that it was possible to speak with all the blood rushing to his face. Tsunade-sama, please cover yourself. Tsunade looked down and saw that her girls were bouncing freely and flushed redder than Ino's skirt. Hooking them back into the shirt and straightening herself out, she gave Naruto the evil eye. What the hell are you gawking at, brat? Seeing she wasn't going to get an answer from her stunned son, she turned to Ino and gave an apologetic grin. Finally shaking herself of her blush, she saw Hikaru in Ino's grasp with his eyes covered. She smiled seeing her grandson and opened her arms. What are you waiting for, sweetie? Come give your grandma a hug. Hikaru broke from Ino's grip and ran to Tsunade, who picked him up and enveloped him in a bone-crushing hug. It had been a long time since she had seen him except in passing, and she missed the little boy's bright smile. She sighed in contentment. He was so much like his father when he was younger and wasn't burdened with so much responsibility. She turned back to see Ino, and raised her eyebrow at the kunoichi's attire. If she didn't know better, she was imitating Naruto and looking damn good doing it. Hearing a groan behind her, she hazarded a glance to see Naruto peeling Jiraiya off the wall and helping him back into a chair. Noticing everything was as it should be, she motioned for Naruto and Ino to have a seat while she held Hikaru in her lap. All right, now that the gang's all here, what gives me the honor of seeing you, besides a long overdue visit from my grandson? Naruto took a deep breath and let it out slowly. This was gonna be hard. A squeeze on his hand let him know that Ino was right beside him. Giving her a weak smile, he turned his attention back to Tsunade. Ba-chan, I have a secret to tell you. But not only you, I need to tell those closest to me. Ero Sennin's already here, so that just leaves Iruka-sensei and Shizune-chan. I'd like you to call Ino's parents too, since she's involved in this. I won't say a word until they all get here. What about Kakashi, Sakura and Sasuke? Don't you want them here too? Naruto's face darkened and Ino could feel a cold chill at the mention of those names. She was finding out firsthand just how powerful the link between them was. She sent a mental soothing to him and saw him visibly relax. Tsunade, my two ex-teammates are definitely out of the question. You know that. As for Kakashi, I don't want him here either. I tried to be forgiving in the past, but the more I think about how he treated me while training me, the more upset and angry I get. True, he showed me the secret behind shadow clones, but beyond that and tree climbing I learned jack shit from him. I haven't spoken to him in years and he's made no effort to speak to me at all. I'm through with him. Tsunade frowned at this but understood. Naruto had tried to forgive and forget, but it takes two to tango, and Kakashi wasn't dancing to the same tune. He showed little to no remorse to blatantly favoring Sasuke in the past, and even now could be seen hanging out around the future Hokage. She cringed at this thought and her chakra flared just a little, but she snapped out of it when Hikaru pulled one of her pigtails, getting her attention. Yes, little one. What is it? Grandma, you need to get Mama's parents and Iruka-sensei in here soon. Daddy has a big secret and it'll make you laugh. Mama's parents? Do you mean Sa? No. He means Ino's. That'll be explained too. Call Shizune and have her fetch them, then come in here herself. I'll put up a sound barrier. While Shizune was playing messenger girl, Naruto was busy putting up a sound barrier. Ino was chatting with Tsunade about her relationship with Naruto, and Jiraiya was playing with Hikaru while Genmaki watched with a disapproving eye. He liked Jiraiya well enough, it was just that the man's idea of fun was trying to convince Hikaru to yank Tsunade's top off. Hikaru adamantly refused, saying he didn't want to see old lady, and sent Jiraiya into peals of laughter, earning him another trip into the plaster. Finally, after what seemed like eternity, everyone was gathered and chairs were offered. Naruto and Ino declined theirs and stood side by side, holding hands. After greeting Ino's parents, he was on really good terms with them and they adored Hikaru, not having any grandchildren of their own, yet. They hoped Naruto could remedy that. He coughed to get attention and began his story. Okay, so you all know about the Kyuubi. Well, I'm here to tell you the rest of that story. And that's how I became a demon. So any questions? Voices were immediately thrown everywhere. Persistent questions milling in the air until a very loud shout from Tsunade silenced everyone. She glared at them all and noticed that when Naruto said he was not only a demon but the Kyuubi, she had held Hikaru even tighter. She was relieved that the little boy was still human, but was still unsure that Naruto's story was true. Show us. Prove that you are the Kyuubi. Sigh, Ba-chan, I'm still Naruto. Kyuubi is a title. I'm a king of foxes now. And as for proof, he dropped the henge and everyone's jaws hit the floor. Hikaru giggled when he saw their faces and looked up into his grandmother's eyes to see her completely speechless. He leaned up and planted a kiss on her cheek. Daddy looks funny when he's furry. Doesn't he, Grandma? Tsunade snapped out of her stupor and looked down at him with a grin. Well, dear, it's certainly better than the other times I've seen him with tails. Now hop down so I can examine him. Hikaru complied and Tsunade stood before Naruto and grabbed one of his tails harshly, causing him to yelp in pain. Hey, watch it. Those things are sensitive, you know. Be gentle. She nodded and proceeded to pet the tails and moved to his whiskered cheeks, stroking them, causing him to purr. She looked back at Ino's mother and saw a familiar glint in her eyes, one of a need to rub the cute, furry thing. She motioned her over and forced Naruto to his knees so she could examine his ears. Ino's mother, heretofore known as Yuka, for lack of a better name, sidled over and began to scratch an ear while Tsunade scratched the other. A blissful smile came over Naruto's face, his tongue rolled out one side, and his tails wagged happily, some thumping the two women and sending them into giggle fits while the men laughed hard and long. Here before them was a demon lord reduced to a mere pulp at the mere scratch of an ear. Ino laughed in spite of herself, seeing her mate so serene. Then she remembered the second part of their visit. Mom, it's good to see that you accept Naruto as a demon, because that's the second part of our calling you here. As you all know, I've been going out with Naruto for 6 months now and I couldn't be happier. I just recently found out about his being a demon and to tell you the truth I didn't care. I love him. Plain and simple. And now for my part of the secret. With that she dropped her own henge and revealed her royal purple tail and ears. Gasps were heard around the room until they heard Hikaru giggle once again while playing with Ino's tails. Mama looks pretty with a tail, doesn't she? Yuka smiled at the innocence of the little boy. He was a natural icebreaker. Any negative thoughts about Ino's transformation were thrown aside when it was revealed that, yes, Ino was more beautiful with her new appendages. They made her look otherworldly and more goddess-like. She walked to her daughter and along with Inoichi, gave her a hug. Oh sweetie, you do look lovely. Now care to tell us why you have a tail? Thus began Ino's tale of how she became queen of the foxes. Eyes went wide and mouths opened at the tale, and when she told of how she and Naruto were now mates, Yuka threw herself at Naruto and cried into his chest, confusing the young demon. Thank God you two finally got together officially. I thought Ino was never going to get married the way she was going. And now I find out that not only is she married, she's a queen. Calling her princess when she was little seems appropriate now. Of course I expect grandchildren and I'm sure Tsunade-sama wants more as well. Mom, you're babbling. Be still. Now then, we have a more pressing matter than grandbabies at the moment. Naruto only has a year left in this plane before he has to go the domain of the foxes and rule there. There are certain things we must accomplish before that. Genmaki. Bring forth the scroll. Genmaki waddled forth with a giant scroll on his back and flipped it into the air, letting it land and unroll with flair before stepping back into the shadows of the room. Tsunade, Jiraiya, Hikaru, and Ino step forth. I have a gift for all of you. This, Tsunade, Hokage of Konohagakure, is the summon scroll for foxes, my gift to Konoha. You four shall be the signers and holders of the scroll until Hikaru comes of age, where it will be passed down through his family through the generations, each becoming the new fox Sennin. Hikaru, as my son, you shall be the first to sign. Sign your name in your own blood and put a handprint at the bottom. The rest of you follow him. And so it came that they each signed the scroll, and once done, it rolled shut and poofed out of existence. Naruto smiled at all of them and clapped his hands. Well, now that that part of the business is out of the way, I would like to say thank you to all of you for accepting mine and Ino's love and status as royalty in a demon realm. Now each of you summon a fox. Hikaru, Genmaki is your personal summon, so he won't need to be summoned. He'll be with you forever. Now the rest of you. No seals needed, no chakra needed, this is my gift. A summon without burden. Now do it. 3 cries of Kuchio's no jutsu rang out in the office, and with 3 bursts of flame, a yellow fox, a red fox, and a green fox arrived in the office, bowing low to Naruto and then to Ino. The green fox, larger than the rest and having 4 tails, spoke for the rest. "Ah, Lord Naruto, such a pleasant surprise to meet you. I am Jero, the red one is Akane, and the golden one is Azane. We are honored to meet you all, Lord Jiraiya, Lady Tsunade, and of course Queen Ino. How may we serve you? I simply had them call you here to test the contract, Jero. I am happy that you approve of my choice of scroll bearers. My son is partnered to Genmaki. I myself will be the boss summons and shall handle all matters in the human world accordingly if need be. I don't want to put a strain on our people." Hearing Naruto speak with such regal bearing astounded everyone except Ino. It just made her want to ravage him, and he chuckled nervously at their looks. Tsunade was the first to recover. "What do you mean, boss summon? Just how powerful are you? Remember that it was my chakra that held the Kyuubi at bay. Since I'm the new Kyuubi and am a fusion of my power and his, that makes me a total of a little over 18 tails of power. Of course 9 is as high as you can go, but I'm the most powerful being alive right now. Too bad I was shut out from being Hokage, huh? No one would ever attack us with a fox demon for a leader with near limitless amounts of chakra." Iruka finally found his voice after absorbing the fact that the boy he thought of as a son was now a summon, the most powerful no less. "Naruto, how did all this come to be? Why do you always seem to be in the midst of trouble? Why do you have to leave us?" Naruto crossed to the man and enveloped him in a hug. "Iruka-sensei, I'm not leaving forever. As a Biju I have the power to come and go as I please in this world. But I have other responsibilities now and I can't ignore them. In a way, I got my wish. I'm a leader and I'm acknowledged. I'm happy. I have a beautiful mate and a wonderful son. You guys are my family. Let Konoha be stupid and resentful of me. When the time comes, I'll still protect them. Let Sasuke be Hokage, I'm something more. I have what his precious master always wanted. And what's that, Naruto? Everlasting life. I'm immortal now, Iruka-sensei. And so is Ino. We'll protect Konoha forever or until we deem them unworthy of our protection. But as long as our family is happy here, we will remain." Shizune came forward and enveloped him in a hug and a kiss on the cheek. "I'm happy for you, Naruto-kun. You finally got what your heart desires. And all it cost you was your mortality. I'm proud of you, little brother. Thank you, sister. I love you too." Inoichi and Yuka came next. "Naruto, you have no idea how happy I am that my little girl chose you over the Uchiha she used to crush on." "Daddy. Now pumpkin, I'm just teasing. Ahem, Naruto, if you ever hurt my little girl, demon or not, I'll castrate you and then kill you, clear?" "Crystal, sir. Good." Inoichi slapped him on the back and was surprised to see he didn't budge an inch. Yuka then made her way forward and enveloped him in a motherly hug and whispered in his ear. "I want grandbabies by the end of the year or you're dead, mister." "Mom. What? How did you?" "Oh, that's right, super hearing. Now then, what about a wedding? We're already mates by demon law, I don't think we need anything else." "I don't think so. My baby girl is getting married in a church and that's final. There's so much to prepare. Invitations, dress, bridesmaids, ooh." And with that squeal the girls launched into a frenzy, leaving the males confused and slightly fearful for the future. Naruto leaned over to Inoichi and whispered in his ear. "Hey, this wedding thing isn't going to hurt, is it? I mean, how hard could it be? Ever been kicked in the balls, kid?" "Yeah, why? It's gonna hurt like that, except forever." "Aw, damn." The men all cringed at the thought of a wedding and stood forlorn until Naruto turned and went to retrieve his new family. Unbeknownst to him, the older men all had predatory smiles on their faces. Bachelor parties are always so much fun. Getting back home was easier than getting to the Hokage Tower. After inviting her mother and father over for dinner, and threatening Naruto so that he invited the rest of the party, they simply teleported back home and everyone collapsed on the couch. Hikaru, exhausted from playing with the older men all day, was asleep in Ino's arms while she played with his hair, trying to get it to straighten out, which much to her dismay, was like trying to straighten a coiled spring. Naruto was stroking the fur of an exhausted Genmaki. Making that many trips to the Fox domain in one day was tiring even for him. Both Naruto and Ino sighed at the same time and looked lovingly at each other. Let's get these guys to bed and hit the hay. I'm bushed. With that they picked up their respective bundles and made their way forward. After changing Hikaru into his pajamas and flopping Genmaki onto a pillow, they made their way to their bedroom. Not even bothering with bedclothes, they simply fell into bed and wrapped their arms and tails around each other, sighing happily in contentment, too exhausted to do anything strenuous. To Ino it felt so good to just lay there with no expectation of doing anything other than feeling comfortable. It was still an odd feeling, since all the guys before Naruto expected something every night. She smiled into his shoulder and licked his mark, making him shudder. He looked at her with a raised eyebrow. Otherworldly stamina or not, he was still tired. Don't worry, dear, I just wanted to see your reaction. I like making you jump. Keeps you on your toes. Now then, why did you want me to sign the scroll? Because when I leave, you're staying here in the human world. What? I don't think I heard you right. My place is beside you as queen. Your place is here beside Hikaru as his mother. I'm leaving him in your capable hands, and when he enters the academy I want you to be his Junin instructor. I'll help you, of course. And I'll be home every night and at least 2 days a week. This is still my home after all. But Hikaru is human and can't come with us. I need you to take care of him while I can't. He leaned over and bit her mark, earning a sharp breath and lustful moan. Come on, babe. I'll make it worth your while. Ino glared at him for a moment and then smirked. Bloody cheating bastard. That's not fair, biting my mark. What if I bit your? You won't if you know what's good for you. Oh really? Why's that? I outrank you, here and there. You bite me and I'll demote you to, well, damn, you're still a one-tail, so I can't do much there. Ah, I know. I'll make you babysit for all the new fox mothers. That doesn't sound so bad. I like babies. Foxes tend to have litters of up to 4 or more, and there are literally thousands of demonesses in our kingdom. She looked up off his shoulder to see the fox-like grin he was displaying and scowled before biting his neck hard, causing him to moan loud and squirm. Feeling that he was ready for a round, she smirked and rolled over. Good night, dear. I have a headache tonight. You evil little bitch. The silence in the air was deafening until the clink of a dropped fork broke it. Ino stared at her mate and narrowed her eyes in disbelief. What the hell do you mean you don't know anything about weddings? You were married once, weren't you? Head nodded in agreement and others voiced their opinions on the matter. Naruto just sighed and wondered why he had agreed to this dinner date with his new family. Ino's parents were dumbstruck and the looks from Tsunade and the others wasn't helping him any. Putting his hands to his temples he rubbed them, trying to make the headache go away. Ino, I was married. That's true. But I never had a wedding. Sakura was pregnant with Hikaru by a couple of months and didn't want to have a wedding. And Tsunade should know this since she was the one who signed the papers. He glared at her pointedly and Tsunade took that moment to knock her sake back and avoid eye contact. Looking away from his mother for the moment, he locked eyes with Ino's parents. Yuka had tears in her eyes and Inoichi had a stupid look on his face. You mean to tell all of us that you have never been in a wedding? Never said vows? Never gotten to eat wedding cake? No. What does it matter anyway? As long as we love one another, what does the wedding matter? A strong wave of fear overcame him at that moment and he saw that all the women were staring at him with intent to kill. His ears lay back on his head and he began to whimper. Inoichi clapped a hand on his back and Jiraiya did the same. Naruto, you don't understand. The wedding isn't for the both of you. It's for Ino. Women have a built-in need to mark what is theirs, and a wedding is their way of showing you off and saying, "This is mine." Hands off. Sorry kid, but if you don't do it, you die. Naruto sighed and put his head in his hands. Why him? He was Kyuubi, lord of all foxes. Why did he have to do something he didn't want to do? Oh yeah, his mate was evil incarnate and would make his life a living hell. Now he knew why Shikamaru called her troublesome all the time. What the hell did you just say, Naruto? All attention snapped to Ino and quizzical looks were given in her direction. Naruto raised an eyebrow. He hadn't said anything out loud, did he? He turned to Jiraiya and gave him a questioning look. Jiraiya shrugged and looked back at Ino. What do you mean by that? Naruto didn't say anything out loud. Yeah, I only thought that. I didn't speak out loud. Genmaki did say that our link was strong. Let's test drive this. Hey Ino, here's what I plan on doing to you tonight. The only thing they saw was Ino turn blood red and fall out of her chair, a small smile on her face and blood dripping from her nose, her tail wagging happily. After the shock wore off and Yuka and Tsunade had helped Ino back into her chair, she looked at Naruto and blushed again. Naruto just raised his eyebrows and smirked. I thought so. You read my mind and didn't even know it. Did you like my ideas, dear? Quote. I thought so. Now then, it appears that Ino can read my mind. Looks like I won't have any privacy at all for quite some time. Oh well, moving on. No, I have never been in a wedding, I have no idea what to do in one, and I'm pretty much useless at this point. Just plan what you want and tell me what time to show up. Ino looked like she was about to burst into tears. But Naruto, I wanted us to do this together. We have to. It'll be our only wedding and I want your input. We need to pick colors, arrangements. Fine, just make everything you can orange and I'll be good. You know what? You're right. I think between me, Mom, Shizune, and Lady Tsunade we can get the job done. Oh my god, why did I think he would want something other than orange? I heard that. Ino glanced across the table at him with wide eyes. You heard me. Yes, I did. It appears we can converse without actually speaking. A side effect of your family's jutsu, no doubt. Oh really? Well then, allow me to return the favor and tell you what I'm going to do to you on our wedding night. Everyone was looking back and forth from Ino to Naruto since neither had spoken for several minutes. Suddenly, Naruto flushed red and passed out, muttering things about evil and whipped cream. Jiraiya's infamous lecherous grin spread across his face and he immediately figured out what was going on. He smirked at Ino, sending a shiver down her spine. So, care to tell everyone what you and the brat have been telepathically telling each other? I can make several educated guesses, but he never got to finish since Tsunade sent him into the wall and Yuka walked over to kick him in the balls. Shizune would have done something, but all the fun things were taken. She just pouted in her chair. Iruka cleared his throat to get everyone's attention. I believe we were here to have a nice, calm, normal dinner. And also to discuss wedding plans. Please stay on track. I have enough problems being the only adult in a room full of children, don't make me the only adult in a room full of adults. Tsunade stuck her tongue out at him and crossed her arms in a huff. Fine, spoilsport, we'll get back on track. But you have to arrange everything on Naruto's side. Iruka groaned and covered his face. That was brilliant, Iruka. You walked right into that one. Konoha had been a fairly quiet town since Naruto had matured. Sure, there was the occasional prankster that tried to be an upstart, but no one would ever match Uzumaki Naruto for sheer quality. This particular morning, however, was punctuated by high-pitched squeals and several grunts and groans. The reason? The girls Ino, Tsunade, Shizune, and Yuka were dragging the guys Naruto, Iruka, Jiraiya, Inoichi, and unfortunately for him, Hikaru around town to make arrangements for the wedding. Naruto wanted Ichiraku's to cater but was immediately shot down by all the women, and even Ayame refused when she heard about it, citing that a wedding deserved more proper fare, and sent Naruto into whimpers again. Hikaru merely looked around in awe at the whirlwind that was forming around him. His mother was so excited she was nearly hyperventilating, and his father was about to have a conniption fit. He didn't know what to think. Ino finally got to the shop she wanted after making everyone taste several wedding cakes. No one complained about that, and picking out invitations and bouquets could have been done at any time, but they were passing her parents' shop, so why not? The finest clothing store in Konoha was dead ahead, bringing excited squeals from the women and groans from the men. The girls were excited to try on dresses, the men were ready to bolt in a heartbeat. Even little Hikaru was fidgeting badly. With a "let's go," Ino led the charge into the shop. Naruto sighed heavily. He had already been dressed up in no less than 5 tuxes and 13 kimonos. He was tired, he was hungry, and he was starting to get agitated with Jiraiya. The old man seemed to thrive off of seeing the girls in tight-fitting clothes and trying to convince Hikaru to do things to them when they weren't looking. Iruka was off in his own little world, and Inoichi was just as excited as the women. It wasn't every day your daughter got married, he reasoned. Ino had finally gotten around to trying on dresses, and he wasn't allowed to see her until she had found the perfect one. He groaned, thinking of how much this was going to cost. True, most of the time the bride's parents paid for most, but Naruto was nothing if not self-sufficient. He refused to allow them to shoulder the amount alone. Not like with his book sales, he wouldn't have the money back in a month. And to see Ino happy, it was all worth it. Giggling and cries of, "No, that's not quite right either," rang out for what seemed like hours. Naruto had fallen asleep on a bench, and Hikaru had laid out lengthwise on it, with his head resting on his father's leg. Jiraiya had resigned himself to reading a magazine, hoping to see a little cleavage, and Iruka was dozing in a chair. This is the scene Ino walked in on. She looked at Naruto and Hikaru and AWWWED, as did the rest of the troop. The two of them looked adorable in that position, but Ino had a goal in mind. With a load, ahem, all the men woke up. Naruto barely opened his eyes and cut them in the direction of the noise and closed them again. Realizing what, or rather who, was standing there, they immediately snapped back open, and his neck damn near broke trying to swivel to see her. Only one word came to mind when he saw her. Beautiful. Ino blushed and tried to cover her cheeks to hide it, but her mother wrenched her hands away and threw them down to her sides. Ino quickly clasped them in front of her and looked down in embarrassment. She had meant to come out and look extremely sexy for Naruto, but he had blown that out of the water by calling her beautiful. Naruto took his mate's embarrassment that she didn't like the dress and was forced to come out in it. He scowled and stood up. Walking to her, he circled her like a hungry animal and looked at her from every angle. It was a pure white, although her pureness was up for debate in Naruto's mind, and exposed her shoulders. The veil was thrown back behind her head, and the train was especially long. It was exquisite. Through with his analysis, he smiled and stood in front of her once again. He lifted her chin up with his fingers so that she looked him in the eye. What do you think? What do you think? Do you like the dress? Yes, I love it. It makes me look radiant, startling, beautiful. Ino, you could dress in a burlap sack for all I care and you'd still be the most beautiful woman in the world. A chorus of AWWWS rang out through the shop, and the pair jerked around to see everyone staring. Naruto put on his best foxy grin and scratched the back of his head. Well, it's true. Hikaru had woken up at this point and looked at his mother. He cocked his head to one side and gave her a curious glance. Mama, I think you're missing some of the dress. Your shoulders and the top of your are showing. Nobody was able to stand up straight for 15 minutes after laughing so hard. The shopping for bridesmaids' dresses went just as well. The only problem was when they got to Tsunade. She was going to be performing the nuptials, but Naruto insisted that she have a formal kimono for the occasion. Her bust line was the problem because of her rather large assets. The kimono they had settled on made her squeal with happiness. It was made of silk and hugged her body perfectly. And best of all, I don't have to pay for it. Tsunade thought. She could use it for more than the wedding, and if she played her cards right, maybe she could convince her son to buy her a few more sets of clothes. She liked her normal attire well enough, but it pays to be able to impress dignitaries and such. She adjusted herself one more time and stepped out of the dressing room. The silence she walked in on made her nervous. She raised an eyebrow and swept her eyes over the crowd. You don't like it? I thought it was a perfect fit. Jiraiya, unfortunately for him, was the first to offer his thoughts. Damn woman. If I knew you looked that good in a kimono, I would have bought some for you years ago. The way they make those girls of yours pop. He never got to finish that sentence since Naruto bashed him over the head, knocking him out. Goddamn pervert. Gotta love him, but he can ruin anything with that mind of his. Naruto turned back to see all the women with angry looks on their faces and Tsunade with her arms crossed over her chest. He decided that discretion would be the better part of valor and hauled the old pervert out of the store by the collar of his shirt. Taking him home gave Naruto a chance to get outside and away from the wedding frenzy in any event. It only took a few minutes to deposit Jiraiya on his couch and then return to the clothing store to find everyone waiting for him. Ino and her mother had already made all the arrangements for clothing and just needed his signature. Inoichi had nearly had a stroke when he saw the price tag and was still in shock, sitting in a chair in the corner. Naruto glanced at the price at the bottom of the paper and shrugged, while walking over to his future father-in-law. He knelt down and whispered in the man's ear. Don't worry about the price. I got you covered. With what I make, it's not even a dent, and besides, it's all worth it to see Ino smile. Inoichi grinned and nodded. He thanked whatever gods were above that he had a rich son-in-law. This would definitely make retirement a lot easier. He cracked his neck and stood to face the troop, only to see his daughter fussing over her adopted son. He chuckled and wondered when he'd get to see his own grandchildren. He caught his wife's eyes and they both grinned. We must have been thinking the same thing. He thought. Time flew by very quickly for the little family, and the day finally came where wedding bells would be heard. Ino had invited all her friends and family to come out, and it was a large gathering. They had opted to have the ceremony on top of the Hokage mountain where there was plenty of room. The Akamichis were chosen to cater, and Naruto was basically foaming at the mouth to try some of their barbecue ramen. It was quite famous throughout Konoha. Everything was perfect and nothing could ruin this day. Naruto sighed and looked back to Tsunade. She smiled at him and gave him a peck on the cheek. She couldn't have been more proud of him that day. She wistfully thought back to the days where she planned to be married to Dan. Thinking of him always left a smile on her face. A sad smile, but a smile nonetheless. She looked once more on the men standing on the dais with her. Iruka was the best man, and Jiraiya actually looked dignified, if uncomfortable, standing in his formal kimono. Tsunade smirked at this. The old goat should be uncomfortable after foisting his books off on Naruto. Although, the boy does have a knack for the romantic and they're always well written. She admitted with a slight blush. Shaking her head, she continued awaiting the bride. Naruto looked down at his young son and smiled. The boy looked so uncomfortable holding those rings, and he hated sitting still. Feeling a pat on his shoulder, he turned his head and gazed at Iruka. Looking further past, he saw a widely grinning Jiraiya. So brat, you ready for this? You really only want one lady? Look across the aisle there. There's plenty more than just Ino, you know. The Toad Senin's remarks got him a sharp elbow in the gut from Iruka, and many raised eyebrows, wondering what he could have said to elicit such a reaction from the normally mild schoolteacher. Naruto turned and took in the sight of all his mates' bridesmaids, all dressed in matching kimonos. Hinata and Tenten looked lovely as always. His blushing bride was nowhere to be seen at the moment. Removing his eyes from the lovely ladies in front of him, he surveyed the crowd. Everyone was here, it seemed. He smiled at all of his friends until he came to a certain pair. He scowled and his eyes narrowed. He hadn't wanted to invite Sasuke and Sakura, but Tsunade told him it would be in bad taste not to invite the future Hokage, no matter how much everyone may dislike him. He had begrudgingly agreed, but he had hoped they would have the good taste not to show up. So much for that idea. He gritted his teeth when he saw Sasuke with that same self-important smirk he always had, his arm around Sakura's shoulders. She didn't look happy to be there. In fact, she looked downright uncomfortable and hesitant, like she had been drugged there. Oh well, not my problem, thought Naruto. A sudden whirlwind of sand in front of him caught his attention out of the corner of his eyes and his scowl turned to a wide grin. Gaara and his family appeared right in front of the dais. Walking down the steps, Naruto embraced his friend. I see you were able to make it, my brother. I'm happy that you are here. Ah, and hello to you too, Kaoru. I haven't seen you in months. How are you? The little girl paid him no mind, however, and made her way to stand by Hikaru, talking with him animatedly, while the poor boy tried to look for escape. Naruto, Gaara, and Gaara's wife Matsuri laughed at the boy's predicament. Ah, young love. It appears that I won't have to arrange a political marriage after all, Naruto. Kaoru seems quite smitten with your son. She takes after her mother in so many ways. Once she sets her sights on something, she simply won't let go until she gets it, and even then the boy has no hope. He'll end up just like Shikamaru. Now dear, you know that Tamari just has Shikamaru wrapped around her finger. He can't say no or she'll beat him up. Besides, he loves her even if he calls her troublesome. Yes, but look at how Kaoru acts toward Hikaru. I'm telling you, the poor boy doesn't stand a chance. He'll give in, I assure you. All three shared a good laugh at that and carried on their chit-chat until a familiar melody began to play. Gaara gave Naruto a reassuring smile and took his family to their seats. He nearly had to pry Kaoru away from Hikaru but assured her that they could play afterward. Naruto looked toward the screen that was set up so that no one could see the bride and his jaw nearly hit the floor. Escorting his little girl down the aisle was Inoichi with the biggest smile on his face. The girl in question, however, was garnering more looks than anyone. Ino looked straight ahead to her mate. She knew she looked good, but the way everyone was staring at her, she knew she was drop-dead gorgeous. Even Naruto's tongue was hanging out. She never turned her head, but her eyes were scanning the room. She secretly smiled at the turnout until she swept over a pink head and the dark one beside her. She kept up her smile on the outside, but on the inside she was doing a mental war dance. If only Tsunade hadn't made Naruto invite those two. Ah well, nothing they could do about it now. Finally reaching the dais, she turned to her father, who kissed her on her cheek and handed her over to her mate. You look beautiful, Ino. That was enough to bring tears to her eyes, but they still had to go through with vows. Oh, how she wanted this over with. Tsunade stepped forward and coughed to get the couple's attention. We are gathered here today to bring together two souls in holy matrimony. Naruto sat back in his chair at the head of the table by his wife and sighed in happiness. The wedding now over, everyone had moved to take in the excellent food of the Akamichis, and man was it ever good. Naruto himself had knocked back over 10 plates and had drunk a few flasks of sake, not that it affected him. Regular sake was like drinking water, before Ino drug him onto the dance floor and they had shared their first official dance. Now kicked back and trying to regain his breath beside his mate, he watched everyone else. Jiraiya had somehow convinced Tsunade to dance with him, and surprisingly enough, the old pervert was behaving admirably. He was also an accomplished ballroom dancer and was impressing Tsunade to a new degree, if the blush on her face was any indication. Anko had Iruka as her partner and was trying her best to make him slip and fall into the valley between her. Naruto sighed and wondered when his father figure would ever get the hint that Anko wanted him badly. Perhaps that was where his cluelessness towards women had come from. His eyes settled on his ex-wife and his former best friend and he gritted his teeth. Ino heard the noise and gave her husband a kiss to settle his nerves. Don't worry about them, Naruto. We have all of eternity to ourselves. Don't let the past consume you just because he's an asshole. Indeed, Naruto. It is only with great misfortune that he has accomplished as much as he has. Gaara, I didn't hear you sneak up on us. Well, I wouldn't be much of a ninja if you heard me sneak up now, would I? Take your eyes off the two lovebirds and look at our children. Naruto and Ino looked over to the corner where they could see Kaoru and Hikaru talking with each other. Hikaru apparently was telling a funny story and Kaoru was laughing up a storm. Other children who were Hikaru's friends were gathered around and watching them with great interest and giving their input. The story finished, Kaoru laughed again and leaned in, giving Hikaru a peck on the cheek, turning the poor boy into a tomato. All the children laughed at him and he hid behind Kaoru's back until his color returned. Gaara turned back to the newlyweds and chuckled. See, I told you that the two were destined to be. Our friendship has spilled over into the new generation Naruto. And besides, their offspring will be especially strong. Two former Jinchuriki's children should make especially strong children, and I've always wanted to see how strong my grandchildren would be. Add in your strength and we've got shinobi gods. Gaara, I've already told you, leave them be. If you're right, but don't pressure them. They're young yet. Let nature take its course. We found love, didn't we? Why rush to who will find it without a problem? Hikaru has the looks to get any girl he wants and Kaoru the same with boys. Perhaps, but I've always wanted to see how my red-headed grandchildren would look with blonde and pink streaks. Gaara and Matsuri howled with laughter, while Naruto raised his eyebrow and Ino giggled. Ino sighed, wishing the wonderful evening would go on forever. After the wedding they would be going to Suna to enjoy the oases and generally enjoy life for 2 weeks. Hikaru would be staying with Tsunade, much to Tsunade's and his pleasure. She was enjoying the glow of her wedding when she felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned up to see Sasuke with that smirk on his face and Sakura behind him with a hangdog look on hers. May I have this dance, Ino? It seems it may be the last time I get to enjoy your company. She gave Naruto a pleading look, but his gaze held fast. His eyes, however, told another story. He didn't want Sasuke touching his wife, and that made her heart flutter, but appearances have to be kept. Go ahead, Ino. It would be most unseemly if we denied the future Hokage a simple dance. Just hurry back. I wish to dance with you again. Ino nodded and let Sasuke take her hand. She had a bad feeling about this. He whisked her onto the dance floor while Sakura sat down beside Naruto. Sakura sighed on the inside as she took the chair next to Naruto. She had tried to get her courage up to talk to him many times in the past few months but never seemed to be able to. Finally she had convinced herself that she could do it at his wedding. Naruto was a naturally forgiving person and never held a grudge, even to his enemies. Stealing her resolve, she took a deep breath. Naruto, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. What did you say? I'm sorry for what I did. I left you and Hikaru all alone and I'm sorry for that. I loved you both but I wasn't in love with you. I'm sore. You're years too late for that, Sakura. I don't care anymore. I forgave you long ago but I will never forget the pain you caused. I can never forget what you and Sasuke have done. You broke my heart. Fine, I can live with that. Sasuke stole my dream. Fine, I can live with that. But you abandoned your son, Sakura, for a heartless bastard and I will never forget that. Don't think I'm the same person you married, Sakura. That man died the night you left. I'm Uzumaki Naruto, reborn. I'm no one's plaything and my heart and soul belong to Ino now. I am bound to her and she me through more than words in a written contract. We are bound at the soul. I'm happy for you, Naruto. I really am. I just wish that I could undo some of what I've done. Why show remorse now, Sakura? It didn't bother you back then, why should it now? Your inner voice never spoke up to tell you different back then, so no words you say now will put anything right. And as far as Sasuke goes, what the? Why did Ino just slap him? As soon as Sasuke had whisked Ino onto the dance floor, his smirk widened even more. Ino bit her lip and tried not to let him get to her. This was obviously a trick or something. So Ino, how does it feel to be married to a loser and Adobe? I wasn't sure your standards had fallen so low that you would just be with anyone. I thought I still held a place in your heart. You lost any place you might have held in my heart when you left us for the pedophile. I hope he wasn't too rough on you. Or did he eventually have to exchange the stick in your for a whole tree after he reamed you? Sasuke scowled at her verbal jab. He was losing this war of words already and he wanted to get her good and upset before he handed her back to Naruto. He wanted her to question his humanity and his loyalty. You know the Dobi still loves Sakura. I bet he'd leave you for her in a heartbeat if he could. And for your information, nothing ever came near Mai. Ino smiled sweetly. She was right. This was a way to try to get her to doubt Naruto and she was now winning the war. No reason to let up now. Well, I'm happy to hear that you're still a virgin there. And as far as Naruto and me, he would never leave me. I'm his queen and he's my king. We're meant to be, bound at the soul. You pathetic little worm, would never understand love on that level, if you've ever understood love at all. So off. Sasuke ground his teeth together. He wanted this bitch upset and quick. No one talked to him that way. No one. The smirk on his face got sickly big and he growled out his words. Well then, if that's the way you want it, when I become Hokage, the first thing I'm going to do is declare the two of you unfit parents and place Hikaru under my care. After he graduates from the academy, I'll send him on the most dangerous mission I can find and then we'll see how damn smug you are. Ino's reply was a feral growl and a slap that could have disintegrated steel, aimed at his jaw. The festivities immediately came to a halt and Naruto was beside Ino in an instant. What happened? This asshole threatened to take Hikaru away from us when he became Hokage. I merely showed him what I thought of the idea. Tsunade made her way over and tried to establish a form of diplomacy by asking what happened. She was answered with a growl from Naruto that made everyone back up except Ino, who offered her own growl to his. Sasuke simply stood there smirking. Well, Dobi, if you think you can do anything about it, fight me. If you win, I'll leave your family be. But everyone knows you can't defeat me. You never could. You're right, Sasuke. The old Uzumaki Naruto never could have beaten you. He was too kind and forgiving. However, now I have a family to take care of. You are of no consequence anymore. And you have tried to ruin one of the happiest days of my life. I'll never forgive you for that. As for your offer, of course I'll fight you. Tsunade immediately stepped forward. Naruto, think about this. You can't fight the future Hokage, it would look bad. Think of this as my wedding gift to Ino. He has insulted her and I can't let that happen. Honor demands it. Besides, there are plenty of people here who would love to see him taken down a peg or 100. His arrogance knows no bounds. Hatake, I know you're here. Come out of hiding. I saw you in the back. Kakashi stepped forward, his eyes cast toward the ground. It had been years since Naruto had even acknowledged him in public and now the only reason he called on him was because his favorite student had shamed the idiot of Team 7. He was ashamed of himself but he never apologized to anyone. Why start now? Looking up he gazed into the taller blonde's eyes. Yes, Naruto. How can I help you? I want you to referee a match between myself and Uchiha Sasuke. Only stop when one of us is incapacitated. Understand? Understood. But are you both going to fight like that? At that Sasuke peeled off his kimono, revealing his battle garb. Naruto narrowed his eyes. You planned this. You planned to ruin our wedding day. You bastard. So what? I'm an Uchiha, we do what we please. Besides, it's not like I'm going to get dirty fighting you. Naruto glared back at Kakashi and cracked his knuckles. He turned to all the people and saw them watching in anticipation. Kiba and Lee, of course, were the ones to break the silence. Kick his Naruto. Show him what it means to be an actual ninja. Naruto put on a foxy grin and kissed his wife on the lips before whispering in her ear. Take Hikaru and stand next to Gaara. This could get messy but it won't take more than 5 minutes. Naruto, you're not going to hurt him too bad, are you? Nah, I'm just going to break a few bones and make sure he can't have any more children. Ino giggled, nodded, and took Hikaru and herself to stand next to Gaara. She smiled at the Cage, who raised an eyebrow. You might want to put up a sand shield every now and then. He's not going to hold back. Tsunade put her hand on Naruto's shoulder and bade him to lean down. He complied and listened to her. Don't hurt him too bad, Naruto. He deserves it, but the council would have your hide for it. Promise me you won't. Go all out. I promise to go no more than 4 tails. He isn't worth more than that. Wish me luck, Ba-chan, and let everyone know that after this the festivities continue. Tsunade nodded and turned to the throng. All right everyone. This match will be underway soon and then we will continue with the party. Hatake. Start when ready. Kakashi coughed and turned to Sasuke and asked if he was ready. He got a nod. He turned to Naruto and saw him still in his kimono. He raised an eyebrow and asked if Naruto was going to fight in that. His response was a snort and a snap of the fingers. Naruto went up in a blaze of fire, causing Kakashi to raise his arms to fend off the heat. When the flames died, Naruto stood there in a black battle gi and black pants with a blood-red sash. On his back was the kanji for Forsaken Samaritan, surrounded by 9 golden foxtails. He wore no shoes but his feet and ankles were taped, his toes exposed. He wore no hitai but had a bandana with the kanji for bad on it. His wrists and hands were taped and his hair was wild, flowing with the breeze. He appeared as he did in his younger days, blood-red eyes and extended fangs and claws. He had decided to stay human for this exhibition for the most part and not flaunt his demonic form. Ino was slightly disappointed that her husband had decided not to show his beauty. It still got her hot and bothered when he did, but decided it was for the best. Everyone was in awe at the change and whispered that perhaps Sasuke had picked a fight he should not have. Naruto merely rounded on Kakashi, who still had a dumbfounded look on his face. Now we may begin. Kakashi put his hand in the air and lowered it, shouting, "Begin!" Before jumping back out of the way. Neither combatant moved, they just stood there analyzing the situation and forming battle plans in their heads. Well, Sasuke was. Naruto was just standing there with his hands by his side, which infuriated Sasuke to no end. How was the idiot planning to fight him if he hadn't taken a stance yet? Something about this just didn't seem right, and knowing about Naruto's unpredictable nature as he did, he opted to activate the Sharingan. If his opponent was going to let his power hang out, then so would he. Kakashi watched all this with wide eyes. Neither man had moved yet and he was already sweating about the outcome. He didn't really want to see either hurt, but knew in his heart that Naruto couldn't win. It just wasn't possible to beat the Sharingan. That's why Naruto was never able to bring Sasuke home. He simply couldn't stand up to the awesomeness of that eye. Sasuke was the elite, a noble, someone who was gifted from birth. Naruto had no finesse, and even though he was of noble blood, you'd never be able to tell it from the way he acted. He had no air of dignity, and even though he worked hard, it just couldn't overcome his deficiencies. It's just too bad. Once Sasuke makes his move it'll all be over. Poor Naruto. Ino stood on the sidelines practically foaming at the mouth. While she had a link to her mate that allowed them to communicate without fail, her own powers had been amplified to where she could pick up the subconscious thoughts of others if she concentrated on them. Ino had been picking her way through the crowd, seeing what they thought of the match. 99 of the people wanted Sasuke ground into hamburger meat, but there were a few that simply would not back a demon. The council had somehow gotten wind of the match and had come scurrying like the rats they were to see their precious Rokudaime Hokage beat the snot out of the worthless Uzumaki. Then she had picked up on Kakashi's thoughts and had gone into such a silent rage that she began to shake and Gaara had to calm her by putting his hand on her shoulder. Unfortunately, Naruto had felt her rage through the link and had asked her what the problem was. "It's nothing, dear, except that your former teacher has decided you don't have a snowball's chance in hell of beating the traitor. I heard him thinking that your hard work would never amount to anything basically." So yet another person who just gives things to the Uchiha. Not like Hatake ever did anything different when we were growing up. What he said was not only an insult to me but also to our friend Lee and his sensei guy. I will not stand for this. Please, don't interrupt me in this fight, Ino. I want to show them my true power. Of course, Naruto. Have fun and hurry up. We never got to have another dance. Sasuke stared at Naruto wondering what the hell was going on. He had seen the blonde stiffen in one instance, then relax, and now he was chuckling. What the hell was going on in his head? Was the fox cracking jokes now? Perhaps a trip inside with Tsukuyomi would be appropriate. Suddenly the deep voice of Naruto boomed out over the mountain. Tsunade, I'm afraid I won't be able to keep my promise to you about this battle. It seems that certain former teachers believe that a genius can overcome hard work, and I will not stand for that. Lee, I'm dedicating this to you. The flames of youth shall prevail. He was answered with a loud, yush. From two distinguishable characters in forest green kimonos with orange sashes. Tacky, but suited the wearers to a T. No one could accuse them of being boring, that was for sure. But as their cries of youth rang out, a certain silver-haired Junin was looking wide-eyed at a certain blonde, wondering how he had found out what he was thinking. Tsunade was beside herself with worry. She didn't know now what Naruto would do, and she couldn't stop him if she wanted to, and she really didn't want to. Hell, the whole village couldn't stop him even at half power. Murmurs flew throughout the crowd, wondering what he was talking about holding back for. You don't hold back in a fight against a Sharingan wielder. Tired of the constant insults to her mate, Ino shouted above the din. Shut up. It's starting. Indeed it was. Sasuke had taken back his standard stance and was prepared to lunge forward when Naruto made his first move and took a stance no one recognized. He spread his legs till his feet were away from his body and his knees bent, his body hunched forward. His arms hung limp in front of him, the hands half clenched, the claws razor sharp and ready to slash. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at this absurd stance but shook it off and waited for him to make a move. Even with his Sharingan activated, he never saw Naruto lunge forward and cut his shirt to ribbons, though before appearing back in the position he had been in beforehand. No one saw him move. There was a blur of yellow, an afterimage where he stood, and just a second later, he was back where he started, with the Uchiha's shirt fluttering to the ground in shreds. Jaws slacked at the scene and were immediately followed by smirks when everyone realized that had he wanted to, Naruto could have cut Sasuke to pieces before he could react. Ino was trying to suppress her giggle at the body of the Uchiha. Unlike her husband, whose body was very muscular and tan, the body of Sasuke was that of someone who never had to work for what he had. His body was pale and his muscles undefined, though there was hardly any fat on his body. Tsunade sneered and thought he looked like Orochimaru, while Jiraiya was thinking along the same lines, just not in so kind a manner. Sasuke, however, was livid. The idiot had shown him up once again, in front of a crowd no less. How did you move at a speed that not even the Sharingan could see? It's not possible. Stop relying on that fox and face me like a man. Oh really? Do you have any right to demand how I fight, Hokage-sama? I don't seem to remember you having any morals when we fought at the Valley of the End about using unnatural power. Or is it just the fact that your inner Orochimaru might come out if you lose control? By the way, how is it to have your mind raped every night? Or does he just molest your inner child? Naruto was trying to goad the Uchiha into making a fatal mistake, that mistake being pulling out his Chidori. Feeling he was winning the mental war, Naruto kicked it up a notch with a sneer that would have put Orochimaru himself to shame. Not so fun, is it, Uchiha? Having a voice in your head telling you all the time what to do, to let it out, trying to take you over. I've lived with that my whole life and you've only dealt with it a few years. How you coping? Have you begun to break down yet? Feeling the pressure of locking away another soul yet? Does the council know about your predicament? That you hold Konoha's greatest missing nin in your body? Or do they know and just don't care that a traitor and his master can waltz in and take over as Hokage? I'd like some answers soon, Sasuke-kun. That was it. Sasuke snapped and lunged at Naruto, throwing Kaiden jutsus everywhere, scorching the ground and causing general mayhem. Several times Gaara had to create a sand shield only for it to shatter like glass from the heat being generated. What surprised people the most though, was that Naruto was bouncing around the battlefield like a little kid on sugar, laughing gleefully the whole time. He had flustered the normally unflappable Uchiha and was enjoying himself immensely. Nothing could bring him down from this high, this elation at messing with Sasuke's head. Well, nothing except a maniacal laugh and some extremely cold words. Uzumaki, if you don't fight me, when I become Hokage I will carry through with my words. I'll take your son from you and send him on dangerous missions. I'll make sure his life is as miserable as yours was. You miserable scum, fight me. Prove that you're worthy of my scorn or your child's life is forfeit. Kukukukuku. Naruto stopped cold in his tracks and caught the fists of the Uchiha and held him firm. His eyes had gone back to blue, the illusion of ferocity gone. Now they were that piercing, frightening blue that could melt your soul. Naruto stared down at the shorter man and spoke with clarity. What did you say? It was a demand more than a question, and it made Sasuke pause for a moment. He cut his eyes at the crowd and saw that even among his supporters he had no sympathy. Mess with Naruto, that's fine. But mess with his son and you've opened yourself to a world of pain. Ino was furious and had marched over to Sakura to find out if this is what she thought of Hikaru also. Before she could start a rant, however, she found the pink-haired woman in tears, sobbing frantically. She kept muttering the words, evil, and, no, not Hikaru, over and over. It seems her husband was not the saint everyone made him out to be. And he had threatened her son no less. Sakura's eyes hardened and she jumped to her feet, shocking Ino and everyone else with what she shouted. Uchiha Sasuke, if you ever touch my son, husband or not, I will end your existence on this earth. Mark my words, you soulless bastard. Well, that was unexpected. Naruto was musing to himself on the actions of his ex-wife. He may not love her anymore, but one has to admire the conviction of a mother to protect her children, whether she had seen them in recent years or not. He was removed from his daydreaming by the bitter voice of an angry Sasuke. You shut the hell up, woman. I will do as I please, to whom I please. I am an Uchiha and you are mine to do with as I please. Remember who you belong to. Killing intent immediately flared up everywhere at the Uchiha's words, all the women ready to kill him at a moment's notice. Many were former fangirls who couldn't believe that this was what they wanted to be involved with. The rest were men who didn't like any woman to be spoken to disrespectfully. The most intense ones were from all his friends, who he had fought and bled with. The 6 enormous ones were from Ino, Sakura, Tsunade, Jiraiya, Gaara, and surprisingly Hikaru. Sasuke's eyes widened as the killing intent slammed into him and he wilted slightly, before hearing a gasp from the crowd. Hearing slightly labored breathing, he turned his face to stare at a completely feral Naruto, his tails and ears now revealed in all their glory. His fangs were enormous and he literally radiated death. His voice now had a demonic timbre to it. You have threatened my child Uchiha Sasuke. That is unforgivable. You have threatened your mate and have spat on the very ideals of decency that everyone holds dear. I can smell the snake on you, you sick, twisted little man. You will feel my wrath as I break every bone in your body. Your uppance has come, Uchiha. Sasuke could only look on in fear as Naruto raised his fist and plunged it into his chest, shattering his sternum and making him scream in pain. All he got in response was a hoarse laugh from the man standing in front of him. Hurts doesn't it? Not as bad as a hole in your chest, but it still hurts real bad. Now then, where to strike next? I know. Ino, dear, ask Sakura what bone I should break next, please. I can't decide. There's simply too many choices. Kakashi broke himself out of his stupor long enough to try to reason with what he thought was a Kyuubi-controlled Naruto. Naruto, that's enough. You've made your point. You won. It's over. A low growl answered him, followed by another demonic chuckle that, surprisingly enough, did not make the crowd shudder. After hearing their next Hokage threatened to murder a child, how bad could a demon defending the child's honor and the honor of a woman who hated him be? Most of Naruto's friends were staring in wonder at his transformation, and more than a few females were thinking impure thoughts of how cute he looked and wondering what the tails could do. Ino, hearing these thoughts, turned to the crowd and released her own henge, showing her beautiful ears and tail. Sorry girls, he's all mine. Hands off. Just enjoy the show. It's not every day you get to see a future Hokage have his handed to him. Once again, no one was as shocked as they should have been, but being ninja you see a lot of weird things in your life. Fox ears and a tail weren't all that weird compared to a guy who could kill you by killing himself and a puppeteer that made puppets out of dead people. This would just require an answer later on. That chuckle had now turned into deep laughter and all eyes swung back to a hysterical Naruto. I won. It's over. I don't fucking think so, Hatake. This match was over when he threatened my son. This match was over the second he threatened the mother of his children. Konoha, this is your future Hokage. A mentally unstable lunatic. An abuser of women and children. Truly you have fallen far. Now then Sakura, what bone is next? Ask her Ino. Well Sakura, what bone is next? You can't say none because he'll break them all. I know, it's just his way. Pick wisely and hurry. Sakura sat thinking about her choices. She had come to the hard realization that her love for this man died the instant he threatened her son. Hurt her all you want but leave the children alone. Her anger grew and grew the more she thought, and it manifested itself as a chakra flare that was felt for miles. She slowly stood from her kneeling position and steeled herself, her chin raised in defiance. A sickening smirk crossed her face. Break the one bone that cannot be repaired and will never be used again, especially by me. After your wedding is over, I wish to speak to Ino and yourself, because my marriage to this shell of what a man should be, is over. I'm taking my children and leaving, so he cannot corrupt them with his Uchiha ideology. They will grow to be kind and humble, instead of self-serving and arrogant. Ruin his manhood, Naruto. If I never ask you for anything again, make sure the Uchiha clan of the past dies with him. A slow smile crossed the face of Uzumaki Naruto and changed into an ear-splitting grin. Turning that maniacal grin and mischievous eyes to Sasuke, who was whimpering on the ground, that devilish voice came out one last time. It seems the Uchiha clan you knew dies today, Sasuke. I'll make sure your destructive seed can never soil this land again. You'll be alone till your end days, never loved and never wanted. I'll make sure of that. Now then, how best to remove you from the gene pool? I know, it's perfect. You may want to bite onto something. Naruto knelt down beside Sasuke and began to channel as much Yuki into his hand as he could. While not enough to kill, it was enough to irreversibly damage his reproductive organs beyond repair. His hand hovered just over Sasuke's crotch and red chakra poured from him into the traitor. Sasuke's screams were horrifying. To him it felt as if his innards were being melted and then reformed and then melted again. It was the closest thing to Tsukuyomi you could come to, except the pain was real. Satisfied that his rival was in immense pain, Naruto shuffled so that he could look the Uchiha in the eyes. I wouldn't ever suggest you trying to do anything to my family or my friend Sasuke, because Hokage or not, I will kill you. You are filth, you are scum, and you and Hatake deserve each other. The council deserves you. Konoha, however, does not deserve a coward, a thief, and a traitor to sit in its most honored of positions of power. I am a self-appointed watcher of Konoha Uchiha. I will be watching your every move, and if you slip up, I'll end your miserable existence and the lives of everyone who worships you. You no longer hold the power you did, Sasuke. You threw it away years ago to pursue a stupid goal of revenge. You threw it all away, and when you came back it was handed back to you on a silver platter. You don't know suffering Sasuke, but you will, oh you will. Now someone take this garbage to the hospital and away from my wedding. Kakashi stepped forward and placing Sasuke on his shoulder, shunshined out of sight. Naruto stood upright and turned to find himself lip-locked with his wife. Removing his lips from hers, he surveyed the crowd and found many waiting for answers. Well, that's a better sight than what I thought it would be. Least no one's running around screaming, "Demon." Suddenly the small voice of Hinata broke the silence. Naruto-kun, why do you and Ino have fox ears and tails? Numerous agreements were called out and Naruto smiled at his friends and family. He was finally being accepted fully. He wouldn't tell them the whole truth yet, but they deserved to know a half-lie at least. Well, alright. As you all know, I hold the Kyuubi inside me. I've absorbed almost all of his power and it has given me fox-like features. Ino has them because she's my wife and mate, and one night, in a fit of passion, I bit her on the shoulder and she ended up transforming as well. It seems I kinda transferred some Yuki into her system and it changed her. But doesn't she look beautiful with a tail? Everyone had to agree that yes, she did look beautiful. Kiba, of course, had to ruin the moment with one of his astute observations. So you just gave her a demonic venereal disease. Gross. Man, I thought you loved her. I do love her, you freaking moron. And it's not VD. I bit her on her shoulder and gave her some of the Kyuubi's chakra. That's why she has that cool mark. I have the same one where she bit me. See? No biggie. The ones that knew the truth marveled at his ability to lie straight-faced to his friends, but figured it was for the best. Best to let them come to terms with it one change at a time instead of all at once. His lie told, Naruto placed his arm around Ino's waist and intertwined one of his tails with Ino's. They both looked at Sakura and came to a mental decision. Sakura, go get your children and pack up your things. You're moving into one of the guest houses on our estate. And tonight, we'll be having a talk before we leave for Suna. Now go on. Sakura was at a loss as to what to say. Her former best friend and ex-husband had just offered her hospitality when they had no cause to. She bowed and made her way home to gather up her belongings and children and leave that abomination she called a husband. Naruto and Ino turned to the now sated crowd and hollered out in unison. Come on people, the party ain't over. Let's dance. And dance they did, long into the night. By the time they got home, Naruto and Ino were tired as hell, and basically threw Hikaru into his room. The boy turned shot put nearly missed his bed but was plucked out of the air by Genmaki, who growled at Naruto, who just waved his hand and offered a good night. He and Ino had other matters to attend to, like talking to Sakura and her children and getting them settled into one of the guest houses on the grounds. They walked into the living room where Sakura was sitting on the couch with her two children. She looked up to where they were and offered a small smile. Thank you both for taking us in, and I'm sorry your wedding was ruined. What are you talking about? That was the best gift Naruto could ever give me. I'm just glad you've finally seen him for what he is. Do they know about your decision? Yes. You couldn't really say Sasuke was much of a father beyond an occasional HN. He never really acknowledged that they were his unless they messed up somehow. Then he'd punish them. Life with Sasuke wasn't all that great, truth be told. I was just too much in love to see it. Well, that's in the past now. Look toward the future and build a new life. Now then, I believe there is a young boy that would like to see you in that room. Take your time and we'll look after these two. Oh, and watch out for Genmaki. He's not too fond of you. Don't make any threatening moves toward Hikaru. Let him come to you, don't go to him. Now then, little ones, what are your names? The little boy smiled and spoke up. My name is Jugo and my sister's name is Karen. Naruto raised an eyebrow and looked back at Sakura, who grinned sheepishly and shrugged. Wasn't my idea. He named both of them while I was knocked out in the hospital and signed the papers himself. I didn't want any reminders of his team, and told him so, but I was told to shut my mouth and mind my own business. Geez, Sakura, how did you put up with that for 4 years? Sigh. Very unhappily, I can assure you. My only ray of sunshine was these two. Well, I have a certain pinky blonde to get reacquainted with. If you hear screams, it's because he attacked me. Sakura peeked her head in the door and was met with flashing yellow eyes and a low growl. A shout from Naruto for Genmaki to behave quieted him down, and she entered with caution. Grabbing the chair from Hikaru's desk, she politely asked Genmaki to wake him. The deed done, the small boy sat up and rubbed his eyes, taking in the visage of his guest. Once he realized who it was, his eyes narrowed and his voice turned icy. Hello, Mrs. Uchiha. To what do I owe the honor of your presence? Sakura was taken aback by this. Naruto had really drilled manners into her son's head, but he sounded so cold. Thinking back to how she had just walked out on them, she felt really miserable, and his glare wasn't helping. She sighed and looked down, her hair shielding her eyes as the tears began to fall. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I'm sorry, Hikaru. I'm sorry for leaving you. I'm sorry for being a bad mother. I'm sorry for not being here while you grew up. I'm sorry for everything. I wish I could take it all back, but I can't. I know you must hate me and I accept that, but I want to try to be a mother to you again. I know you heard me at the wedding, Hikaru, what I said about my soon-to-be ex-husband. Hey, I'm a failure at everything. I've deprived 3 children of a parent, and I'm a failure at love. I had love when I was with you and your father, and I gave it up for a stupid idea that I loved Sasuke. I'm sorry, Hikaru. She could barely squeak out those words before the tears and sobs tore her apart. She sat in the chair and Hikaru watched as the sobs racked her body. He turned to Genmaki for guidance, at a loss as to what to do. Genmaki sighed and took a whiff of the air. Her tears are genuine, Hikaru. If you took the time to train your senses like I asked you to, you would know this. Despite my misgivings, I believe you should reconcile with your mother. I'll be in the other room while you two talk. And as for you, Sakura, don't deceive the boy. I'll know if you hurt him. Sakura nodded dumbly as the fox turned the knob with his tail and walked out, shutting the door behind him. Her eyes widened when she felt a pair of arms around her waist and a weight on her chest. She turned her gaze downward and was met with a shock of blonde and pink, the owner of which was a sobbing little boy. Mama, I missed you so much. Don't leave me alone again, Mama. Sakura smiled and tears of happiness flowed anew. Everything would be all right. In due time, everything would be all right and she'd have happiness again, with a complete family. It seemed they had been in there for hours in that room, crying, relearning everything about each other. Finally crying themselves out, they decided to rejoin the rest of the party. Opening the door to the hall, they walked to the living room and began to giggle at the sight. Sitting on the floor propped up against the couch was Naruto with his head down, Ino with her head in his lap, Genmaki curled up behind him on the couch, and Jugo and Karen curled up beside Ino. What really made Sakura's day was the fact that both Naruto and Ino were in their demon forms and had their tails wrapped around her children like blankets. They looked so warm and comfortable she couldn't help but smile. Unfortunately, before she could feel of Ino's tail, Naruto and Ino both woke at the same time, rousing the children. Karen yawned and looked at Sakura. Look, mommy, her tail is so fluffy and warm. Can I get a tail like that? No, dear. I'm sorry, you can't have a tail like that. Ino and Naruto are special and they're the only ones in the world who have tails. The 2 small children's eyes bugged out when they heard Naruto's name and they turned to him in awe. Naruto. So you're the Dobi mommy told us about. A tick mark formed above his eye and he glared at Sakura, who had the good grace to look embarrassed. Sasuke always used to call you Dobi when he talked about you, and he told them one day that only Dobes eat ramen. I convinced them to go to Ichiraku's with me and told them the story of a certain Dobi I used to know and how special he was. I'm sorry if they offended you. No, not at all. Listen, little ones, you shouldn't say things like that about other people. It's mean and not very nice. Understand? They both nodded and then turned their attention to Hikaru, who was still standing by his mother. Karen stood up and wobbled over to where he was and walked around him in a circle. She crooked her finger to get him to bend down, and when he did, she stroked his cheeks, causing him to purr. She giggled at this and proceeded to tug his pink ends, making him yelp. He stood upright again and glared at the now laughing toddler. Hee hee, you're funny. Your whiskers are funny too, and why do you have pink and blonde hair? Sakura bent down and got eye level with all three of her children. Motioning for Jugo to join them, she squatted down behind the two brunettes and pointed at Hikaru. Jugo, Karen, this is Hikaru, your big brother. He's the son of Naruto and me, when I was married to him a long time ago. So he has a tail too. No dear, he doesn't have a tail and he never will. Now why don't you all go play and get to know each other? You're siblings after all. Hikaru was in awe of this and let out a cry of joy. All right, I have a brother and sister. Come on you two, let's go play in my room. Genmaki. Come on. Not knowing who Genmaki was, he had snuck into the room while they were all asleep. Jugo and Karen turned to see the small fox walking toward them. Their eyes went wide and Karen immediately glomped him and picked him up. Genmaki was dragged unwillingly back to Hikaru's room, mumbling the whole way about troublesome kids, and I'm not a damn babysitter, while his king and queen laughed at him. Eventually they settled down and Sakura dropped the bombshell. All right, I want to know everything. So you two spill. Naruto and Ino sighed and Ino went to make some tea. It was going to be a long night and they were both getting tired of telling the story. The next day saw them all in the Hokage's office, where she graciously signed Sakura's divorce papers and put a restraining order on the Uchiha, barring him from approaching Sakura or her children, or any children for that matter, within 100 feet. She scooped up Hikaru and gave him a kiss and said she would bring him over to play with Jugo and Karen every day. The rest of the day was spent preparing Naruto and Ino for their honeymoon and getting Sakura settled into her guest house, which was huge for just 3 people. Gaara and his family met them at the gates that evening and they began the march to Suna. Kaoru wanted to play with Naruto's tails, which kept swatting her hand away, sending her into giggle fits. Gaara raised an eyebrow at the display but decided to just ask the important questions when they were within the confines of his office. Matsuri admired Ino's tails and ears and secretly wished Gaara had struck a deal with his demon, but then realized that he would more than likely have gone totally insane and killed everyone. Sure, crazy people have the best, but when you have to worry about dying during it, it takes all the fun out. Upon reaching Suna, Ino and Naruto struck out for one of the oases that had a high fence around it to keep out peeping toms, and a small shack for lovebirds. Putting all their things away, Naruto dashed back into town to get dinner, leaving Ino to her own devices. After he left, she got a devilish grin on her face and quickly changed into the most provocative lingerie she had, a see-through blood-red nightie with matching thong. She lit candles and incense and then laid back on the bed to await her husband's arrival. It didn't take long and she heard him put the takeout on the table and start looking for her. Smelling smoke coming from the bedroom, he opened the door wide and was instantly hit in the nose with her scent. Putting on the most alluring look she had, she offered him 2 words. Quote,